Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Pinnacle. I'm your host, Pinnacle. Today we have on Ella Allice. She's a singer-songwriter student at Berklee. She has a ton of really valuable insight on how to work together in groups and get creative projects done when it comes to music, how to go about networking, a lot of mindset things that she talks about, how to deal with these low points that you might have during your music career or your creative endeavors. Tons of insight. She's super positive, lots of good energy. And I know there's definitely something in here that will help you out or resonate with you in a way that you can actually take it and apply it to your music. And if you haven't already, check out the Zenith Gallery. It's my new sample gallery. The link's below. You can check out the snippets on my Instagram. That link is also down below. Lots of love and effort put into that first pack. Lots of stuff on the way, so definitely peep that. And there's only 20 copies in total for the first pack. One's been sold. I don't ever fudge my numbers or lie to you guys, so only one's been sold. There's still 19 left, worth a shot, and we got a lot more coming for you in that direction too. And as I always mention, any sort of engagement, a subscription, a like, a comment, negative, positive, whatever it is, I'm looking for all kinds of constructive criticism or suggestions. And it also really helps the podcast. If you want to share it with your friends, anyone that you might that might find value out of it, I try to really make them as valuable as possible for people in the music space. So please share it if you can. It helps a ton with the growth. Thank you.
So my name is Ella Ellis. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm a vocalist, and I study at Berklee College of Music, which is in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm originally from Austria, and I'm super excited to be on this podcast.
A big reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast was because you're actually attending Berklee for music. For one, that's huge. That's really awesome. And two, I don't know much about, and a lot of the people that I work with don't really get into that side of the industry. Like, we're very kind of closed in. I know a lot of rap producers, hip hop producers. I'm learning more from people that have actually attended school for things related to music. And that's obviously I want to touch on a bunch of different things because I know you have a lot that you have experience in. But just starting off, like, give us a little bit of your background. Was music always a part of your life, or is it something that slowly introduced itself? How did it start?
Yeah, so I wanted to play violin when I was about 7 years old. I mainly grew up with my grandparents. They were a big part of my life, and my grandpa always took me to the library, and he always he got me music videos. You took them home and you just put them in the recorder and you watched them. And I watched the Keller Family a lot, so that's how I got introduced to music. And after that, I wanted to play violin. Then I started singing, and then I took guitar lessons, and I was in bands. And after that, I just knew kind of like, okay, music is going to be the way to go. And yeah, that's just how I got to be introduced into music. And that's just, I'm really lucky to find that out so early on. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I'm just really happy.
Yeah, that is really young to know or to have that introduction and to have stuck with it. And even you said you yourself wanted to play the violin, like you're.
Yeah, so I saw that on the Keller Family, like the music videos, and
Yeah,
I got a little guitar for Christmas, and I had them on my shoulder, and I had a pen in my hand. I just made this, and I was like, I want to play this. And so
that's
my
awesome.
family was like, okay, this is a violin. Okay, let's get you a violin.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's
Wow, that's
how,
amazing. Okay,
yeah.
very cool. Yeah. So as you grew up, what like were the first signs that you might want to attend school for music, or did that come later on? Did you apply and then decide? Like how did that all come about?
So I went to musical high school. My major was basically
Oh.
like a I basically attended a lot of music like lessons. Most
Hmm.
of the stuff that I learned in school right now, I already learned in my musical high school, which
Hmm.
is not a problem. I just like to review things anyways. Um, and I went on an exchange year when I was about 15 years old,
Hmm.
and at that time I knew I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music because I attended so many music lessons it was actually illegal. illegal, more or less. They were like, well,
Yeah.
you need to take these classes. And I was like, no, I don't want to take these classes. And
Yeah.
so I just took like 5 music classes out of 8 classes I could choose. And I just wrote songs. And I was like, I want to be a songwriter. And that's how I was like, made the decision. Actually, I made the decision to
Mm.
attend Berklee and to study that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you've decided, okay, I want to pursue getting into Berklee, was Berklee specifically the place that you wanted to go? Or,
Yes. But
okay.
it was kind of like, it was not a straight way there. It's never a straight
Mm-hmm.
way there.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, when I told them, I came back and I was like, I still had 2 years of high school left. And I told them, like, hey, I want to go to Berklee College of Music. And they were like, first of all, where is that? Second of all, what is that? And third of all, like, no, like, we're not gonna let you go again. I was like, no, I'm gonna do that. I'm definitely gonna do that. And they're like, no. And so
Mhm.
after 2 years, like, there's a lot of stuff happened, right? So I was like, okay, then I'm gonna try for jazz vocals in Vienna. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. Like
Mhm.
2 months into that school, I attended Vienna Music Institute.
Mhm.
I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. Like, it's not me. It's not like, the vibe is not what I want. And so I
Mhm.
looked again into Berklee
Right.
and I saw they were giving a lot of scholarships out. And
Mhm.
so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try. And I tried and I basically just got in on the first try. And I was
Wow,
just
yeah.
super lucky.
Mhm.
And I mean, lucky is a big word because, like, there's a lot of work in that too, right? But I was just extremely happy to be there. And yeah, I wouldn't change my decision for anything. It was a
Mhm.
decision that I made. I could have stayed in Vienna, but I
Mhm.
knew, or I know right now as well, that I wouldn't have been happy. And I'm really happy right
Mm.
now where I am.
Yeah, good. Well, and that is a really big, like a lot of those moves are really big moves. They're not light moves for especially
Yeah.
for someone young, so trying to make these big decisions.
Yeah.
When you talk about your career path too, attending Berklee's one thing, and you
Mhm.
also talked about being a songwriter, singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
Is that like did that coincide completely with wanting to go to Berklee, or as you've been in Berklee and as you've progressed, that's kind of more solidified?
No, the reason why I sold my parents on investing in that school and in me
Uh-huh.
is I said, Berklee has this amazing songwriting program. They invented it all. Um, and I want to study songwriting. Like, I want to be a songwriter. And that's the reason why I attended Berklee, because there are tons of other schools out there that are trying to sell songwriting, but they haven't worked with the industry as much as Berklee has. They don't have the connections
Mm.
as Berklee has, and Berklee has so many connections. Like, I mean, you
Mm.
have to, yeah, they will not be given to you, but you have to find them, and they are there. And that's one of the
Right.
main reasons where I was like, I'm investing also in my future because I'm going there and I'm trying to be the best person or the best in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
With the connections, I also have already one step into the business. And that's why my parents were like, okay, that's actually sounding like that sounds smart.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and it is smart, I think, because I mean, first of all, I've never heard like even hearing you describe it that way to your parents. Most
Mm-hmm.
people that I hear when they're going to any sort of college, they don't really, at least most of them, they don't really focus a lot on like that type of benefit, the networking benefits, those types of
Mm.
benefits. And so the fact that you could really clearly see that benefit from that school is really huge.
Yeah.
And even like people I've talked to, some of them realize that networking aspect a little bit later. Like they see it in
Mm.
their third or fourth year, and they
Yeah.
start to do more of it. Going into Berklee,
Mm.
did you know anyone going into it, or was it all fresh?
It was all fresh. I was I was so everywhere when I went into that school. I was like,
Hmm.
I was being in Boston a week before school even started.
Yeah.
I didn't knew anybody. I was totally lost. I had a jet lag. Like, looking back at it now, I'm just like, what did I do in that week? And
Hmm.
it's just so funny how you like see yourself in the past from the future, right? You're
Yeah,
like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, like what the hell did I do? Or what did I do? And you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a genius. But no, it was all fresh. I instantly, like, there's a week of orientation. I instantly tried to like go to every like lesson they kind of put out for free. I tried to make friends, and funnily enough, the friends that I met the first week, or the people that met the first weeks, are now my
Hmm.
best friends. We do not a lot together anymore because we're so busy, but we're still like they're still the people that I feel most connected to,
Hmm.
and it's just so great because like even if I just need something like looking over lyrics or something and be like, hey, can I have your opinion on that? They're like, yeah, sure, like send it over to me,
Mm.
let's check it out together. And that's just the best thing that could have ever happened to me in that first week of Berklee.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you ever afraid, like, or nervous? I mean, nervous, sure, but were you ever afraid that maybe it would be so competitive that you wouldn't be able to, or you'd have maybe a little bit more trouble finding those types of people?
um I actually thought I was a little bit naive. I thought that people would help each other out at Berklee.
Mm.
I have two producers that I'm working now, like constantly with,
Hmm.
um, which is great. But I didn't find them in the first week. I asked about like 20 people in the first months, actually. I asked about 20 people, hey, let's work together. Hey, let's work together. I
Hmm.
got really weird explanations why they do not want to work with me.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like, no, no, I don't want to work with you. And I'm like, okay, then not. Like, fine, I'm over it, you know?
Uh-huh.
There's not a lot of time to like be sad about that because I always know, like, there's something going to be better. That's not for me.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of competition though, and people often do not realize that there is a lot of competition, but that doesn't mean they're not great, or they're not
Mm.
doing their best. And that competition often puts people back. They're often afraid to ask. I was
Hmm.
never that way. I was too naive, but I also didn't ever be sad that people did not want to work with me because I was like, okay, that's just how it is. I'm fine with it. There's
Mm.
something that fits my personal needs better than this.
Yeah.
And because there's no point in grieving about that.
Hmm. See, that's interesting to me too, because so when I went to my first university, it was for health sciences,
Mm-hmm.
and a big part of that program, like a lot of the kids going out of that program wanted to go into med school. So
Mm-hmm.
it was super competitive, and even like other programs that people would go into undergraduate that were wanting to go into med school, I would hear all these stories about them sabotaging each other's projects, presentations, like answers. Sometimes people would be talking to each other and trying to help, like get help, and they
Mm-hmm.
would give each other wrong answers. That's now it wouldn't happen all the time, but
Yeah,
enough that it was like,
a deal.
exactly. But and now this wasn't in my program. This was
Mm-hmm.
everywhere else. But when I came to my program, one of the things that was always emphasized by all the professors and the entire
Mm-hmm.
basis of the program was you guys have to work together no matter what. Like,
Yeah,
period. That's all they grilled into us. And so, that made me realize the importance of, like, the true importance of it. And even hearing, like, you went to Berklee, and the fact that that many people turned you down, that's so shocking to me, because it's Berklee. Like, you're there, this is what you're
yeah,
there for. Like,
yeah, exactly.
that's so crazy to me.
It's so interesting because like even now, like I'm in my third semester. I just finished my third semester. Like it's not even that people do not want to work together. It's like how they talk about each other's music. It's like, oh my gosh, did you hear that? They missed that, or they missed this, or it's just
Mm,
so like, I mean, fine, feedback is always great, but like talking literal shit about each other behind their backs is
yeah,
like, you're like, oh my gosh, like, but that's just like, I don't know. I feel like you have to accept that and you have to be aware that it also happens to you because
yeah,
otherwise you're just going to grieve about it, like I said, and there is no point in grieving about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. I think that's really obviously a really important lesson learned. Like, in really any field. But the fact that you have that lesson, even going right into, like, you seem to have learned these types of things. Either you had them before or you learn them really quick. Like,
Hmm.
which one is it actually? I'm curious. Like, are these types of, yeah, have you always been this way, like kind of viewing it that way, or you learn quickly?
I just, I don't know, like, I feel like I learned quickly. I feel like I was a
Mm-hmm.
really mean person growing up. I don't know. That's like, people are always like, no, you weren't. But like, I feel like I was being very judgmental. I was always taking
Mm-hmm.
feedback as something really negative. I always were really like, in my opinion, in my way seeing the world, people are always saying like, if I ask them, they're like, no, like, it has never been that way. But I feel like I
Right.
experienced the world that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was trying to change that because I was like, I'm just not happy that way. And if I'm like, if my professors or if my friends are like, hey, girl, there's something off with this and this and that in my songs or my lyrics, anything, I'm just taking that and being like, I can take it and this applies to me, or I can take it and be like, this doesn't apply to me. Let's just let
Hmm.
it go.
Yes.
And that's how I deal with my things now.
Mm-hmm. So what year, like, when are you graduating from Berklee?
2025.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
got you. And in, like, I know we've talked a little bit more about your career path, but
Mhm.
is there something like, and it's okay if you don't. I'm just
Yeah.
curious. Is there more something set you have planned for after Berklee, or you're still going through the university and figuring out? Because it's still, you still have a lot of time there. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
There's always like these little plans that are in my head where I'm like ending up kind of. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, right now I'm thinking about going to Sweden. But like, you never know. I don't even speak Swedish or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to explore and then figure out where I want to be and listen to my gut, because that's just really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in going to Berklee, um, out of the lessons, like, you've already named a few lessons you've learned
Mhm.
right off the bat, but what types of things have you learned that kind of surprised you, like you didn't expect it? Or was it all just all open mind, you expected to,
Yeah, there's actually the main lesson that I learned is not like overworking is a real thing, even in the music industry.
mm,
Um, I do work. I love what I'm doing. Like, I love being in a studio, and I just love being and collaborating and working for other people and listening to other people's songs. But there's a point where you're like, okay, I need to be really, really careful because I feel like I'm burning out, and then I'm gonna hate what I'm doing.
mm,
um and that point really, like, that's a real thing, and I never thought that would be a real thing. I was always like, yeah, like, I'm gonna do this and that, and I'm gonna be
yeah.
everywhere, and I'm working on my own songs. And yeah, and that was just like one of um one of the visiting artists, she said that, she's like, it's good that you're working hard, and I see that everybody's working hard in here, but please go out and have fun and like live your life, because that's going to be the songs that you're going to write about, that's going to be
Mm.
selling. And I was like, wait, what? You tell us to have fun? Like, I thought we should work harder, we should like review. And she's like, no, have
Mm.
fun. And that was the thing where I was like, whoa, yeah, it's
Yeah.
working hard, but it's the balance as well.
Yeah, someone else actually mentioned something similar recently to me,
Mhm.
and it was about singers and songwriters specifically, saying, and they were talking about how people in that realm in general do need to have experiences in order to write about them, and it was like so simple, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah. um Going into your final, I mean, I say final, but you have quite some time left, but going into these next years at Berklee, what are you looking to progress the most? Is there anything, like, classes wise, that they focus on more so, that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so there's actually, I just actually declared a double major.
Mm.
I'm going to like there's a couple of majors that are for producing, but I want to know how to actually produce for myself. I know a little bit
Mm.
about it, but I'm always being too scared because there's so many good producers, and like I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to touch that. But I've learned that it's not, especially in the industry today, it's not enough to just be a songwriter. You have to
Right.
know your skills. You have to know how to work a DAW. You cannot just be like, oh my gosh, like somebody
Mm.
else can do it. The more you know, the better. And I'm really excited to start doing that because my producers that I'm working with right now, they're always like, you have such great ideas. Like, I would have never thought of that. And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe I'm not that terrible. I just need to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to do that. Um, yeah, and besides that, not really at that school, but I'm also super excited. My first single is coming out.
Hmm.
That also is really exciting. So yeah, it's just so many experiences that I'm also not aware yet that I'm also super excited because life is changing so fast and there's always
Hmm.
something hitting your way. So I'm always trying to accept it as it is and then work with it. And that's like the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Um, oh, I just had a question based on that, but I forgot. It's okay. I'll come back to it. Oh no, it
Okay.
was about your single. Yeah. So when's your
Yeah.
single coming out?
February 14th. Right now, I might actually take it a couple days like forward. So it's like February 10th or something. It's called
Hmm.
Love Me.
Hmm.
It's about probably Valentine's Day is a good day to release it, then I
Yeah.
thought. And yeah, I'm just super excited.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really awesome. How long have you been working on it? Has it been a while, or is it something that you just want to drop a single?
No, actually, I called my producer. I was like, I want to work on 3 songs and I have a basic concept for them. So let's
Hmm.
do it. And she sent me something over. And the first thing I said was, love me, love me. And she's like, let's do that. So that was in August. So we've been working on that since then. And I said, I want to release that song because it feels so right. I had a couple of singles released prior to that, not released, recorded. And I was like, they don't feel right. Like they just don't feel
Hmm.
right. And
Hmm.
this feels really right. And so I'm going to do it.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
When you're working with these producers,
Yeah.
because I find that when I'm working with artists, it depends on the artist, but a lot of them, if I'm working with them enough, they start to pick up on, what I'm doing on my DAW, or,
Mm.
certain things I might be doing with recording. Uh, do you find that working with these producers, you pick up on these things, and do you have to be like mindful to pick them up, or you just happen to pick them up as you work?
Um, there's a time like when I'm sitting like one of the producers that I'm working with. It's literally we're sitting in a room. He's working on his DAW. I'm writing lyrics. We kind of bounce off on each other's ideas. Um, but that's where I learned the most. But I'm also being like, because I'm so focused, I'm not really seeing what he's doing on his DAW. I just have these
Hmm.
ideas while I'm listening to what he's doing. But I'm also being like, sometimes just like sneaking over and be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, can you show me what you're doing? And then I'm
Yeah.
trying to pick it up. It always, it's not helping always, but it helps often to just ask because just looking at what he's doing is just way too confusing.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely feel like that sitting in a room with a person and producing is very helpful to just pick up some skills for a DAW,
Hmm.
to work in a DAW, actually.
Hmm. When it comes to, I worked with an artist once who was a really good singer, and he could
Mm-hmm.
sing covers really, really well. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
just great voice. But when it came to making his own music, now he's much better. But at that time, when it came to writing his own songs, and even just like, even if you gave him any sort of instrumental and you tried to get him to sing or flow
Mm-hmm.
to it, he couldn't do it very well. What type of advice would you give to people that are, if you maybe have, I don't know if you've seen that with
Mm-hmm.
anybody, but what would you give to someone who's a great singer, but their songwriting, or their other aspects are kind of, maybe specifically their songwriting is kind of lacking? What types of practice and techniques could they do to help get better?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I personally know some of these people, and I also experienced like me being a songwriter. I also experienced like sometimes kind of hitting the wall when it comes to inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
and creativity. What I'm doing, there are a couple of things that I'm doing actually. So number one is destination writing, or in general object writing, just kind of picking something and trying to go from an idea. But being a better songwriter, I would say, looking at other people's lyrics really helps, and
Mm,
identifying the topic, their message, um, how they describe things, um, just looking at other people's lyrics that you really enjoy and like. There's a
mm-hmm.
great song by James Vickery called Turn Me On. I really love that song. And when I'm like really trying to, or when I'm thinking that I'm need to get some ideas, I always go back to that song and look at the lyrics. What is he saying? Um, do the verses fit with the chorus? Does the message come across? Like, I just really try to look at other people's lyrics and be like, okay, this is what they're doing. How can I do that? Like, somebody said once,
Mm,
being a great artist means stealing from the great. And I
mm,
just try to do that when I'm hitting a
mm.
wall, and I just can um, give that advice to anybody who is also trying to be or getting better, especially. That's a great advice.
Yeah, that's true. That stealing thing, especially, obviously I'm not like too experienced in songwriting, and so I
Mhm.
appreciate that advice. The artist stealing is definitely one that I've learned more and more as I've went on. And the more that I talk to people that I look up to,
Mhm.
that are really good at what they do in music, that's something that comes up a lot. So
Yeah. I also feel like it's really funny because, like, you say it's stealing and you actually do not steal at all. You just take
hmm
some kind of thing you like, right? And it
hmm
turns out to be something completely different from the original idea. So I feel like also I should mention that stealing, they shouldn't be afraid of stealing for copyright
yes,
reasons or anything, because it's literally like you're going to end up with a completely different idea than the original song.
exactly. Yeah, that's huge. That's really big. And I think like, yeah, I think one of the things that I read about it too was that even if you try to recreate it like note by note,
Mm-hmm.
second by second, there's always gonna be, it's gonna have your own touch to it by
Yeah.
accident. You said
Yeah.
you played the violin. That's one of my favorite instruments. Do you
Yeah,
have?
really.
It is. It is. Yeah, I love the violin. Violin, piano, and saxophone are my favorite instruments by
They're great.
far.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. What do you have any favorite instruments, or are you kind of?
I don't so when I'm recording or producing for my own or just messing around, I love violins, but I also love, what is this? Yeah, it's a piano sound. It's called by Spitfire. I don't know if the soft piano.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know if I've ever used
Great
it, but I
stuff.
think I think I know what you're talking about. I love
Yeah,
Spitfires, so.
it's so good.
hmm
Yeah. But yeah, going back to instruments, you had a question. Sorry.
No, no, that was basically it. I was just kind
Okay.
of curious on, well, I mean, kind of starting off there, and then, um, if you learn to play the violin, then I assume you learned music theory at a pretty young age.
Um, Yeah, I don't really know. I did learn music theory pretty early on because I was interested in it, but actually not by my by my violin teacher, but by my guitar teacher.
Mm,
Um, he had this, he was a great teacher. He was always like, if you're interested in something, we're gonna dive into it. If you're not interested in it, I'm not doing it. Like, there's
mm,
no point. Let's do something that actually benefits you, right?
right.
And I was just so interested in it, and he was always asking because he wasn't used to it, right? Like, he was just
Yeah,
like teaching students for fun, and then I
yeah.
was like, well, how does this work? How does this work? And we had like great discussions about chords and why they work.
Mm,
And I learned music theory like with him a lot, or
mm,
from him. but not from my violin teacher. And I think that was really funny because like usually you do learn it from classical people, but it
Hmm.
was definitely mainly from my guitar teacher.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
And so what instruments do you play now?
Right now, I'm only playing piano and sing because I just cannot take my guitar and my violin and ship it all the time to the US. It's just, first of all, too expensive. It's a lot
Yeah.
of drama about it. Um, you don't ever know if these things are like actually arriving there.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a thing, right? So I leave it here and I'm always playing when I'm home, but I don't. I mean, I miss them. I'm not gonna lie,
Mm.
especially a guitar or something. But I have great friends. They always borrow me their instruments. I just play
Hmm.
on them because like, can I just like play a little bit?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
that's what I'm doing right now.
Very interesting. I feel like you travel a decent amount. Like, how often are you traveling?
So I go home for Christmas break. This year I traveled so much.
Hmm.
I wasn't used to that amount of traveling at all. Um, this year I took about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 trips
Hmm.
between the US and like Europe and the US. It was like 2 times, 3 times. I don't really, I don't
Hmm.
really know, but
Hmm.
yeah, I do travel a lot.
Yeah. Does it like, do you find that that affects a lot of your potential friendships? Because I find, I mean, if you went to Berkeley and you didn't really
Mhm.
know anyone there, and you met as you went, um, I would assume that you've built some pretty close friendships through that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Does that affect these friendships at all, or are they kind of timeless ones you think you're gonna have for after
it's
Berkeley as well?
yeah, it's definitely gonna be one of those. Like they're definitely gonna be there after Berkeley too.
Hmm.
It's just because we're traveling so much. Like I know that my friends and I, we still stay in contact. My best friends right now in Nairobi, the others are in the US. My producer is in Canada, so it's like everywhere. But we don't talk as much or text as much because or we mainly send like Instagram reels and just be like, hey, look,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
funny, right? So
Hmm.
that's what we do, but we kind of enjoy more time being actually in person and supporting each other like when we're there because we're going through the same experience at the same time when we're there, but we kind of want to also appreciate the time at home with our family and our, well, I guess friends that we're growing up with or grew up with. And so we don't stay as much in contact when we're home.
Hmm.
But that doesn't ever affect our friendship when we're like once we're back. Like we
Hmm.
instantly pick up where we left. And that's great because then you actually have really great friends and they just go with you through everything. And that's just
Hmm.
yeah, I feel like I'm really lucky to have these people in my life.
Yeah. When it comes to being in, like, going to Boston,
Mhm.
the actual city itself, how do you find Boston to be? Because I know that city plays a big role in your university experience, or
Yeah.
college experience.
So last semester I didn't have a lot of time exploring Boston or anything because I was just so busy. But like Boston is a city that I live really close to campus, right? So I just
Hmm.
like go over there and I'm there. Um, but Boston it can be really busy and
Mm.
it can be really noisy and really like a little much overwhelming to all the musical experience you have.
Right.
So I'm always trying to like get out of the city with my friends, but it's just sometimes it's really hard. We're all so busy. If we plan something 4 6 weeks ahead, it probably doesn't happen because by the
Hmm.
time like the day hits, everybody's like, I'm busy. I have to do a studio session. I have to do a songwriting session. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have
Right.
like an exam. Like we just never ever like all six of us are never in one room at the same time. It's literally impossible. But other than that, Boston is okay. Like it's a
Yeah.
city.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was curious too, because I know some people are really like the city really shapes their experience
Yeah.
with their college. So I was curious to see how you kind of view the city and how you kind of manage that along with
Yeah.
your experience. Um, Switching gears a little bit, what's one thing that someone can do? I ask this basically to every one of my guests, but
Mhm.
what's one quality that someone can have or something that someone can do that makes you kind of not want to work with them professionally?
Um, Off the bat is being kind of like, I'm better than you, and that's why I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to work with you. And I
Mm-hmm.
had actually that experience. Somebody actually told me they do not want to work with me because I have an accent. And I was like, okay, that's fine with me. Like, I wasn't upset about it at the time. I was like, okay, next person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it, I feel like that was a great lesson to me because that just showed me, okay, he's a great person. He's a great person. He's a great producer. He's a great songwriter, but I will never work with him because once he said it, I was like, that's not okay. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not okay. Like it's rude, it's disrespectful. It's actually being an international student, no matter like where you come from, having an accent, we speak fluent English. Like we are trying
Mm-hmm.
to integrate in the culture. Like I feel like there's no shame in having an accent, right? But
Yeah.
like just having said that, there are so many things that went along with what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And just people being rude, trying or thinking they're better than you. Um, I would never work with those people. And
Of
I feel like
course.
it's not worth your time. And I would never, like, every young artist is desperate, right? But
Mm.
I just, there's no point. There's more grief and more, not even grief, it's just anger than fun. And it should be a fun experience. Like, music
Right.
is fun, and people are listening to music not because you working so hard, but because they are trying to enjoy it. So making it not a good experience is not worth your time, not worth your energy.
Yes, that's a really good point. Like I know people, I mean, obviously this isn't not to take away from your experience because that's
Yeah.
horrible, really, really
Yeah.
awful. Um, and thank God you have other people to work with.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
that energy thing's really real. Like, making music, obviously a big part of it because it's creative is we go off of emotions and feeling. And
Mm.
if there's something kind of hindering that or hindering the access to that, I find that people's energy in the studio or wherever you're at really, really affects it.
Yeah.
And one person can ruin the whole like session for,
Yeah.
7, 8 people if that's how many there. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I also feel like people are forgetting. That's actually a fun or interesting fact. When I was one of these listening sessions from other people's songs,
Mhm.
the person said she's working with like great artists. She said, the song's great, but I don't feel it. And it was just such a shock to everybody in the audience. We
Mm,
were like, oh my gosh, like she has a great song, she has great lyrics, but she didn't feel that she's transforming the message. So
mm.
yeah, it's just really important to feel the music you're actually writing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and when it comes to Berklee itself, what's one mistake? And obviously, I know you're not a judgmental person.
Yeah,
It's not about that. But what's one mistake that you think you see quite often, like students making, being in Berklee?
definitely being lost in others are better. Like I can't do this because there are other people that are way better. And then you hear their stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, like no way, like you did that. Like
Mm,
their expectations of themselves is so low that they are so scared to get out there. And
mm,
I'm not saying that I'm not always lost in that too, or not quite often lost in that too, because there are times where I'm like, I cannot do this, I cannot release this, I cannot like there's so many times of that, but if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. So you just
mm,
have to, like, that's your job as an artist, as a producer, as a songwriter. Like, that's your job in believing in yourself first before others believe in you. And
mm,
I feel like that's the most mistake. And it's fun because that's nothing to do with being a musician or anything. It's just a personal and also personality um, personality trait, basically.
Yeah.
That is really important.
Yeah. And I think that's so applicable. And I love that you said it out of all people, because, hearing, if students at Berklee, are also struggling with self-belief, then there's people that aren't there yet, or are,
Hmm.
might be in high school, that struggle with self-belief, but they make incredible art.
Yeah.
So hearing that's really, really important, I think. Like as you said,
Yeah.
we've all had moments of that. What do you do when those moments kind of start to get a little bit too often, if you've ever had that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that I do now that kind of help me not being at the low so many times. Um, I found out that the balance between physical activity and like mindfulness is helping me a lot. I
Mm,
also do journaling a lot, but I started running and doing some physical exercise that helped me be like not being constantly at my I can't do this. Because there was literally
mm,
last semester, there was a time where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I should just go home and that's it. Like that was my
yeah.
Berklee experience. And I really am glad I didn't do that, because that was really, I hit rock bottom right there. Um and and I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna go out in nature. And then I was like, you know what? I'm so sad. I'm just gonna go for a run. And afterwards, I was like, I can do everything. And it was so funny because, like, I'm not a sport person, or
Hmm.
sporty person, but I'm trying to just be healthy for myself so I can be the best version in a studio, or just as a human being in general. I feel like it doesn't always have
Yes.
to apply to music, but it just helped me not being all the time, oh my gosh, I can do this. And when I'm like catching myself in those moments where people are like, or when I'm especially, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so great. I'm never gonna be there. I'm just gonna be like, okay, thought, stop, we're not going down that road, because that is
Mm,
a real fear, but it also doesn't have to be reality.
yeah.
And those two thoughts combined kind of prevent me from being like, you're so terrible, to let's just try to be better.
Mm. Tell me about one of the best. I don't know if you spend a lot of time like in what you would call the studio or
Mhm.
whatever, like but tell me about just your best musical, or one of your best musical experiences that you were a part of to date.
I think it was actually in the studio like 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I was just so happy. Like the world was just the best thing ever. Like I was like, this is great. Like I'm never gonna leave.
Hmm.
Um, it was. I was in a studio and I was like, I'm at Berklee at the Dream School. I study songwriting. Just recorded my single. My best friend is the audio engineer. The song, like the music is great. That is the best thing ever. And like listening back to the song now, like I listened to the song like 600 times now,
Hmm.
because we're mastering right now, which is an intense process, you probably know. But
Yeah.
I every time I hear that song at the end, I'm just like, I can feel I can feel the emotions. Like I can feel that I felt it in that moment, that I am trying to send that message out in the world. And then I was like, this is actually, I think, probably the best thing I ever sang. And
Hmm.
that was my personal experience where I was like, yeah, this is probably the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. It was just so great. Like, actually, I have a video of myself. I recorded some parts of the session,
Hmm.
just to watch back and just to listen how I like watch myself, me performing. I
Hmm.
always can recommend that. Not even out of Instagrammable reasons, but just recording yourself and like look back at it. It's just a
Mm.
great way to not only like experience yourself from the inside, but also from the outside. Um,
Interesting.
I don't know. I just feel like it's so different. Like your experience is very different. Um, but it was just like, oh my gosh, like it wasn't like perfect like pitch, sometimes it's just off pitch, but it was so great. Like how I sang it was great. Like the energy was great. And it doesn't always have to be the best pitch. Like I was so often pitchy. Like I even said to my engineers, like I'm pitchy, I'm pitchy, I'm pitchy. She's like, stop. Like there's no point in saying that. Like try to be your best. And in that moment, you just are like, okay, I'm just gonna try and just feel it, and that's just the best thing. I personally think is the best musical experience.
That's really interesting. That's not your next single, right?
Yes,
Like
it is my next single.
oh,
Yeah.
it is your
Yeah,
next single.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. When you said you're having trouble with like some of your singing or like bits and pieces of it during that session, and your or I guess producers or engineers are kind of reinforcing you, is like, did you end up kind of, I guess, getting past that barrier, or was that something that they were able to fix or help you with, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Or was that just totally mental and you just had to get rid of that in your head, and that's what fixed that session or that part of it?
Yeah. Well, there's always a part in every session where I'm like, this is so pitchy. Like I should not be here. Just because I'm so much in my head, which doesn't help you at all. But there are actually two things that helped me, that what people say, like I often remember what people tell me during a session or that impacted me or something, where I was like, this is so smart. The first thing was by one of my colleagues or my peers. He said, I'm just having fun, he just jumped up and down the stage. He screamed his like lungs out. He sang, and it was just so much fun to just watch, right? And after that, my professor goes, well, why was this performance so great? And he's like, I'm just having fun. And I was like, so simple, but so true. And the second thing is, my other producer, he's working with like a bunch of people. And he's like, no matter who is coming in, I don't even care. I'm going to put autotune on everything because everybody is pitchy sometimes. And not the autotune is not the good part, but like being that reminding yourself that everybody is sometimes off and not great. We are in a time where we have autotune, we have Melodyne, we have so many other things, and so many people work with that. And even my professors in like the producing section, they're like, the energy has to be right. We can always fix the pitch, but like if the energy is off and you're not feeling it, you can hear it in the song. And there are just small nuances that can mess up a whole section. If I'm getting frustrated, and there was a time in the studio where it was like we were 6 hours in, it was the second day, and I was like, I'm tired, I want to go home. My engineer was like, I'm tired, I want to go home. But I was like, I have this plan in my head, and if I don't do it now, like this is going to be the best time of my life. Like I'm having so much fun. Like reminding yourself of that fun, and that it's just fun. Like it just has to be easy. If it flows, it flows. And reminding myself of that basically helped me get through that frustration too, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I find that the imperfections, for me personally, that maybe it's just now. I don't know if this has always been the case. I think it's actually been the case for a long time, but I find that when I look back at my most favorite artists, songs, and projects, they're always, a big part of those is you can see where there are imperfections, but they left them in there. They could have fixed them, but you can tell that the imperfection's there because the feeling is there. Like the way they sang it, they couldn't really, I mean, I'm sure they could, but the emotion's there when they sang it that way. So their slight voice crack, even you hear it, it's like, I've forgiven that because it's so much more impactful that way,
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
I've also heard from a lot of producers that these like, when singers go in and trying to be perfect, and there's like slightest like imperfections, which are totally human, right? These imperfections are kind of ear candy for producers. Not everything, obviously, but there's just some things where like, no, we gotta keep that. And
Yes.
I'm just like,
Yes.
can we please get rid of that? And they're like, no, we gotta keep that.
That's
That's
so
great.
true. Yeah, that's so true.
So I feel like we should not, and I talk all of the musicians because we're a whole bunch, but we shouldn't be too too mean to ourselves because we made mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the guys I had on my podcast before, he's a multi-platinum producer, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like got a bunch of really, really cool, interesting advice. And one of the things that he said was just like his whole career, he just described as happy accidents.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also said that the reason that those happen is because he's always just having fun and messing around and
Mm-hmm.
experimenting. And then it just comes together that way. So
Yeah.
but I think the one question that I didn't end up asking,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to contrast your best, but I don't want to end it on a negative note, but your best experiences versus your, more negative experiences in the
Yeah.
studio. I guess we touched on energy a little
Yeah.
bit, but if you have anything to say to that effect, you're welcome to.
Yeah, definitely. I can say something about that. There's always times in every session, even in my best ones, where I'm like being really. But I think we said that. But I still think that's important to mention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are phases where I'm going through like imposter syndrome, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just helpful, I think, for everyone to just remind yourself we all have that. I know somebody, she won The Voice 2014, The Voice Kids 2014, and she said, "Can we write a song about imposter syndrome?" And I was like, "Well, you have imposter syndrome? Like that's just so stupid."
Yeah.
Um, but like yeah, it's just great. Like you just don't have to, just don't let your thoughts destroy your experience just because they're your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I
It's
like
not
that.
really, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. Sorry. I like that because I think it ties back into something you said earlier about just taking care of your mind, the
Yeah.
mindfulness and your physical health and all of it. And that ties in directly to, or maybe indirectly, but quite in some ways directly to your music and your art.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I mean, like I said, you've answered everything. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Like you said, you have a single coming out. If there's
Yeah.
anything you want to promote and your social media and everything, you're welcome to. I'll have it in the description as well.
Yeah. There's nothing actually I want to say. Like my single is coming out. It's called Love Me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about, I don't know, it's just about being loved, but also kind of just enjoying just being loved sometimes. Like, everybody has that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And love has just been a great deal in my life. Like ever since, I always call everybody, "I love you." Like, "Bye, I love you." Like, I just met this person. I was like, "Bye, I love you."
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big deal, and I'm just super excited. Yeah, my social media, you can just link that below. That's fine. And I'm just super excited to share that podcast also on my Instagram and everywhere, if
Awesome.
that's okay
Okay.
for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're.
Cool.
I'm first of all, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. One of, like, I didn't mention that, but like one of my producers is actually not in Boston. She's in New Jersey, and we do
Mm-hmm.
Zoom sessions regularly. So that's like no big deal. We have like
That's
once a
awesome.
week. Yeah, we have like once a week,
Yeah.
like a timestamp. We like, let's meet together. Like we have to work, and then we just
Uh
work,
huh.
and then like everybody does their own thing, and then we come back together and email, and that's it. So
Okay, wait. Before we end the recording, tell me
yeah,
about that because I think people will be interested because I am,
yeah,
and I will take you up on like I will hit you up about this.
yeah.
But tell me just about these Zoom sessions that you're.
Okay, so I met this person through actually a coincidence, and she's like, "Well, I'm gonna graduate like in May," and I was like, "Well, it's March now, and I want to produce a single." She's like, "Oh, well, that's no problem." And then like we just emailed back and forth. It was a summer, and I mean we produced a single prior to that in March and April and May, like I said, but we emailed back and forth over the summer, and I was like actually calling her and be like, "Hey, I want to write 3 singles with that concept, like I said before." And she's like, well, do you have an idea like about the lyrics or anything? I was like, I have no idea. Can you send me something? And then that's how it started. And then I was like getting my schedule together, and I was like, hey, here's the time that I have times. Can we just meet once a week? Because I know if we just do like a Zoom session every so often, we won't get
Mm,
anything done. And that's been the
yeah.
best thing ever. Like, we both know like we're super busy. She has a 40, I think she has a 40-hour job. She's doing other artists. She has a great TikTok. Like, I can only recommend her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she basically just, we just have this thing, once a week, an hour, we do our work, we do besides that hour, our work, and then come back together. And that's just great. Like, I know exactly what I want. She knows exactly what I need, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's just been really great. And sometimes that's the only option you have. And with Zoom and everything is just great because, like I said,
yeah.
you can just talk.
When you're in these Zoom sessions, like
Yeah.
what are you guys exactly getting done? Like, are you mainly just discussing what to do, or is it mainly what is it? What does it look like?
She like it's. I personally think that you have a personal experience too. So we always be like, hey, how's it going? Right. And then you kind of
Right.
go, I just want to throw that out because I think it's really important to not only work together, but also have a personal connection to the person you're working with. That just makes your music also better.
Yeah.
Basically, she is throwing out an idea for like music or something, or she worked on something over the week. And then I go, I usually have my lyrics done by that. And then I go, well, can we have more reverb on that? And she opens the door, and we basically listen through the whole thing. Um, Sometimes it's reverb things or audio effects or, um, well, lyric lines or whatever.
Wow.
I'm sorry. But sometimes it's also just like there's something off, and she's like, I don't hear it. It's like, but I hear it. And then we
Mm.
go like on this like treasure hunt of finding the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
And then she goes, how did she hear that? I was like, I have no idea how I heard it. And then like we just
Mm.
go off on that, and that's just great because like it feels like we're still kind of connected, but
Hmm.
we're not totally like away. Like, it's not like she's like 400 kilometers away and I'm 400 kilometers away from her, and we will never get anything done. We're just
Yeah.
literally there doing things and using the time we have.
This is huge. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, this is really big. Do you ever like have to re-record files and send them back, or
Yeah.
that? Mhm.
So what we're doing like with that song we just made, Love Me, um I sent it to my engineer, like my good friend. She has studio access at Berklee. I was like, hey, I'm gonna bake you a cake. Can you be my studio engineer? That's
Yeah,
literally how it works.
I
Like,
love that.
cake, money, whatever else. Like, I can. You always have to appreciate the time. I mean, they're also investing in you, so you kind of have to give
Right.
back. Um, and she kind of did everything behind the console, and I did my job at the in the booth. And so yeah, that's all we did. We just recorded, and like with that single. Sorry, now I remember what I wanted to say.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
with that single, I after we recorded everything, I showed it in class in my lyric writing class, and my teacher said the exactly same thing that I experienced, and then I was like, I cannot ignore it. He said, I love the idea, I love the song, I love everything, but the tempo is a little slow. And I was like, why did you have to say this? Because I
Mm.
felt it too. And so I was calling her, and that's like basically for every producer. I mean, that's like, yeah, that's like just you're done with the artist usually. I was like, I'm so sorry, and I know I suck, and I know I should have made up my mind before we went into the session, but can we try to make it faster? And she's like, you know what? No worries. And when she said that, I was like, I'm so happy you just said it because I just feel so terrible that we are doing like all the vocals again. But she was so great. She's like, no, it's okay. I also like it better, faster.
Yeah.
So why not doing that? Like, that's just stupid.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All of what you said. I mean,
Yeah.
one of that. I mean, obviously the person that you're working with believing in your stuff enough that they're like, yeah, no, you know what? Let's redo it.
Yeah.
That's huge. The artists that I work with, I have to believe in who I'm working with, especially
Hmm.
if I'm doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And in that way, yeah, then like no matter what happens, there's many times where we have to, go through something like we have to redo so much and it sucks, but we both believe in the song enough that we'll,
Hmm.
make it
Yeah.
happen. Or on the other hand, if I don't, then I will just be honest enough. Like I'll do the work
Yeah.
for you, but I'm not going to lie to you. And,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. I think that honesty and being respectful about what you're doing is just that's just like so huge.
yeah.
Honesty is like I always tell everybody, even if we just work together or just being friends, like tell me what's wrong and we can fix it. But like not talking about it and not saying anything will not help anybody. And being
Hmm.
respectful is just like I could have called my producer and be like, hey, this like sorry, but like this fucking sucks. Um, like we have to redo it again. Like she would have said okay, but like she would have been pissed and she wouldn't have um, done or did the vocal comping or anything like better because how I reacted to what I
Right.
was telling her. So it's just really important to be respectful and honest, and that's just a great mixture to have as a human being, but also as a musician.
Hmm. And then the last thing is,
Yeah,
you talked about baking a cake. So
yeah,
tell me, like, kind of obviously that story's great, but
yeah.
also just like what kind of goes behind that thought process.
I always believe in giving back, no matter if it's money or um, food. I'm a person who just cooks for their friends frequently because I'm always like, I just want to give back. They spend their time with me in the studio and they're super happy. They're like, I'm getting experience, like I'm getting better at this. But also, it's just a sign of appreciation, and I'm always like, I can give you money, like if you want that. Um, or I can bake you a cake, and they always choose baking a cake.
That's so cute.
Yeah, because they're like, I can buy myself something, but like you sitting in
Yeah.
the kitchen for like an hour and a half and doing something for me,
Yes.
it's just really nice.
Yeah, no, I just think I do think that's something that people can actually really learn from, because the idea of like the fact that people will choose the cake over the money,
Yeah.
is really, I think, something people could learn from, because I think a lot of artists, they don't, especially coming up, they don't have a ton of money to spare on their
Yes.
craft.
Hmm.
And so, and they let that kind of get in the way of things, when in reality there's so many more ways to
Yeah.
work with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in a position where I work besides Berklee, and I'm trying to pay my own rent, which is a lot in
Yeah.
Boston. Um,
Oh yeah, no, actually, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. My
no,
friend was
good.
talking about moving there recently, and I saw the prices. I could not believe how expensive it is.
It is
Yeah.
so expensive. So working and coming up for that, I mean, it's just so much. And but my friends are always like help. Like it's also helpful for me. Like they do it obviously because they like cake, but they also do it because
Hmm.
they know
Yeah.
I'm doing my best to give back, and they would take the money if it was fluent for me, but it's not.
Yeah.
So we're all we always say we're all college students. We always are
Hmm.
excited if somebody pays a meal, but we also just rather do something that we can afford giving each other back,
Yeah.
and
I like
that's
that.
baking.
I
Yeah,
like that a lot. I think that's super, like, just really effective, because
yeah,
yeah, I've been in situations and I've seen people, and I think they could have done something along the lines of just something
yeah,
small, and that would have gone a long way versus, nothing.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
yeah, I appreciate it. We will be in touch for sure.
Definitely.
And yeah, I'll link your social media, everything. We'll talk
Great.
soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again.